This is Belt Drive Betty, and you're watching Ride Like a Local here on EastLinkTV. Join us today as we take on an Irish adventure with Celtic Rider Motorcycle Tours and come ride Ireland like a local with Paul Rollins and his crew. I'm in Ireland, and I'm with Paul Rollins from Celtic Rider. Tell me a little bit about being the owner of Celtic Rider and what it's like sharing your beautiful country with thousands of riders from right around the world.
It's been a dream of mine since 1996 to try and accommodate overseas motorcyclists to enjoy the best that Ireland has to offer. And with that in mind, I spent 1.5 years touring our island. Although it's a small island, we have more kilometres of roads than France. And I just think it's sad when I hear people going from city to city and missing all these spectacular sites. So my job was to create them and sell, basically to make people's dreams come true. I really believe that, you know, because there's a huge connection between Canada and North America and many other countries around the world over the last 200 years because of forced emigration. And so there's a huge connectivity with people, and for me to be able to make their dreams come true is my dream come true.
Well, that's a wonderful way to look at your job, isn't it, people? Yeah. The other beautiful thing about this country that I've noticed, besides the gorgeous riding, the food, the people, the castles. I've already seen a castle.
If it isn't if it's not 1,000 years old, we don't even look at it over here. That's true. But no, it's our island is really an agricultural island, and the food is organic. The fish is that comes out of the ocean. We're an island. Our meat is organic. We don't put injections into animals to make them grow a bit quicker. Our vegetables are natural, and that's why Irish people, I mean, look at me, I'm 93 and I only look 53.
You're a character. And like most Irishmen that I've met so far, you fit the stereotypical Irishman. You got a hell of a sense of humor, you love a challenge, and you love where you live.
I love my country. I love my country, and I love the depth of history, and I love our culture, our sports, our music. I love it all. And from the age of 16, I was a motorcycle dispatch rider in the Post and Telegraphs, and we were trained by the Irish Army to deliver urgent government telegrams around the island. So by the time I was 17 and a half years of age, I knew the island better than most people would ever know it. So I've always been on bikes, even when I was married young. I was married to 22, and just to be able to share this country and the best that our country has to offer with my fellow motorcyclists from around the world, I love it.
Right on.
I love it, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking a few moments with me.
How about the kiss? The kiss. Yeah.
We'll be back for another episode of Ride Like a Local. Sean, tell me a little bit about Donegal Castle and its history.
Well, the castle was built in 1474, and it's the ancestral home of a very famous Irish Gaelic chieftain family called the O'Donnells. The O'Donnells were beaten in the Battle of Kinsale in the year 1601 by the English Crown forces, and then the castle and hundreds of acres of land here were given over to an English family called the Brooke family. And Sir Basil Brooke came here in about 1620, and he made a lot of changes to the castle itself. And the Brooke family would have lived here about another 100 years. And following on from that, the castle then fell to ruin, and it was repaired and restored in the 1980s by the Office of Public Works.
That seems to be a very common theme here in Ireland, that the Office of Public Works has done an enormous amount of work restoring the history of your country. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, well, as I say, it took about 10-year project here. For instance, the roof that we have is 40 tons of Irish oak. There are no nails in the construction of the roof. It's all wooden dowels and pegs, because there's a substance called tannin present in the oak, and it would rot the wood over a period of time. So the amount of craftsmanship really with the stonemasons and the carpenters have, it's a sort of skill that's been passed on via apprentice and training schools, and it's put to good use and effect then in restoring, as you say, an awful lot of our national monuments.
And you've been keeper of the castle for how long?
I'm here 13 years now, yes, and it's a joyous job. It's an absolute treat every day because we meet so many members of the public from all over the world, and an awful lot of people have an interest in their history and past, and indeed an awful lot of people are doing family research and so on. We get an awful lot of Americans who would come here, and it gives them a sense of belonging or a sense of home.
Well, thank you so much for taking a little time to share the history of this beautiful castle.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
And joined right now by Patrick Temple, who is the proprietor of a company called McGee's. Now tell me a little bit about McGee's and the beautiful fabrics that I see behind me.
Well, McGee it's a family-owned company, and it was first established in 1866 by a man called John McGee, who was a cousin of my great-grandfather. Traditionally, Donegal tweed was known for its vibrant colour. It's not a dull tweed. It's a herringbone tweed or pepper and salt with a colourful fleck in it. Donegal, County Donegal, where we are today, is the true origin of Donegal tweed. In the 1960s, we went into ready-to-wear garments, and we encompass now a full wholesale clothing collection, as well as the retail here you see today. McGee still continues to weave the vast majority of its cloth in Donegal. So that's hand-woven Donegal tweed is the true genuine article. We also do quite a lot of power weaving as well to increase the dexterity and the type of weaves that we can do. So we've maintained the heritage, but we're still very much a modern mill. Traditionally, McGee would have been known for suits, jackets and trousers. Now we've brought the collection on from not just suits and jackets, but right through to a knitwear range, shirts, coatings, and suits are also a very key part of our business.
How many people does McGee's employ?
Currently, McGee employs 120 people throughout our 3 shops in Ireland, our wholesale business and our weaving business.
Well, thank you very much for taking a little bit of time with us today. I'm being joined by a lady named Greta Byrne. And Greta, tell us a little bit about this visitor centre I find myself in and what your position is here.
Well, my position is manager of the visitor centre here and the site, employed by the Office of Public Works who run the site here. Now the Cage of Fields itself is, well, it's a prehistoric landscape, a farmed landscape which extends for many, many miles all around the visitor centre here on this beautiful North Mayo coast. And it's not just any prehistoric landscape, it is in fact the oldest known farmed landscape consisting of measured out field systems, the oldest known field systems anywhere in the world, not just in Ireland, but in the world.
That's incredible. Now, just behind us here is a spruce tree. And this spruce tree came from a farmer's field buried under all kinds of bog. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes. Well, the ancient landscape here is preserved underneath a blanket of bogland or peat. And the peat wasn't always here. It started to develop about 5,000 years ago. And it will grow where you get a very mild, moist climate like we have here on the west of Ireland. And the bog is fascinating for many reasons. But one of the things preserved in the bog, within the bog itself, is a layer of these pine trees. And they were part of a whole forest that grew during a time of a drier climate. And this particular one had fallen over into the bog. It was growing on the surface of the bog, then fell over and was preserved by the bog as it continued to grow up around it. And that one has been dated to about 4,500 years ago.
That is mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yes.
What other things are we going to see as we go through the fields here?
Yes. Well, what the whole site is, it's a series of field walls. In many ways, they're just like the fields that you'll see all around the countryside in Ireland today. They're serving the same purpose, marking out possibly property boundaries, but marking out areas of, you know, how the farmers control the land for their stock. So it's serving the very same purpose. But these particular fields are dating back to nearly 6,000 years ago. And they're ordinary collapsed dry stone walls, but they're preserved under this blanket of bog that's up to 15 foot deep in places.
This is Belt Drive Betty, and I'm at Kylemore Abbey in Connemara, and I'm being joined right now by one of the tour guides. And Etna is going to tell us a little bit about the history of the Abbey from when it was a castle to today's present state. So, Etna, tell me a little bit about the history of Kylemore.
Well, Kylemore was built here by an Englishman called Mitchell Henry in the 1800s. He was a surgeon from London and he inherited a huge fortune from his father in Manchester. And he came here in 1850 about for the first time. He bought the little fishing lodge that was here on the site, and eventually when he inherited his great fortune, he turned it into Kylemore Castle. And he did it all for his wife, Margaret. So there is a great love story kind of attached to Kylemore. And they moved in and they lived here with their family of 9 children. Now, tragedy did visit the family, unfortunately, while they were here. They only enjoyed about 3 years as a complete family here in the house, and they went off on this beautiful family holiday to Egypt. But while they were in Egypt, Margaret Henry contracted dysentery, so she died while they were in Cairo in Egypt. So Henry had her body embalmed and she was placed in a beautiful glass coffin, and eventually she was brought back here to the castle, and he built a beautiful neo-Gothic chapel which is also on the grounds here as a tribute to Margaret. So Henry continued on here in the castle. He was a very principled man, and he'd become very heavily involved here in politics in Ireland, and he was very instrumental in improving the lives of the tenants here. People were living in terrible housing conditions, they were very malnourished, very vulnerable to disease, and Henry really could see what was happening, and he tried his best to improve the situation here. It's reckoned that he paid about 3 times the going rate in wages for the day, so that was very instrumental first in starting just to bring some money into the area, starting to lift the people up out of the huge poverty trap that they were in this area. And they created huge employment as well, because not only building the castle here, they built 2 beautiful model farms on the estate, and they also built the largest Victorian walled gardens in Ireland. So it created about 400 jobs here in the heyday of the estate. That was a time when there were no jobs in the west of Ireland and people were on the edge of survival. So it was very important that a man like Mitchell Henry came into the area.
Future's Grand Prairie and Region. Business development assistance, business planning, cash flows, market research, business loans up to $150,000.
Community Futures. Growing communities one idea at a time.
We're back on Ride Like a Local, and I'm being joined by Etna, and she's going to explain a little bit about the Victorian gardens. Etna, tell me a little bit about this place we're standing in right now.
Okay, well, the gardens here were built in tandem with the castle in the 1870s, so they would have been at their height really maybe around the late 1870s, and they were typical Victorian walled gardens. Now, they're the largest Victorian walled garden in Ireland, a 6.5 acre garden, and they would have been one of the last great gardens of the period built in the British Isles as well. So this planting style that you see in the garden, it's a very geometric style, very controlled style of planting. That would have been very typical of the early and mid-Victorian period. Now, originally originally we had 21 interconnected and heated glass houses here at Kylemore, and the glass houses were for growing all the exotic fruit and vegetables. So what we would have had here, there was one glass house that was dedicated to growing African violets. They were used to be worn in posies over at the dinner table over in the main house. They had another house that was dedicated to growing exotic ferns, because ferns were one of the big passions as well of the Victorian era. They referred to it as dertopomania, the fern fever. Now the rest of the glass houses said were for growing fruits such as grapes. We had 2 vineries. They had peach houses, so your peaches, your nectarines, your figs. We had bananas, melons and pineapples, and they were growing them very, very successfully here. They were pumping huge heat into the glass houses here. So they had a lime kiln here in the gardens. Now the lime kiln ran day and night, creating big amounts of boiling water, and the boiling water then was passed through pipes, some of them through the soil in the raised beds in the garden. Other pipes then would go through the ceilings of the glass houses to create this beautiful warm environment for all these exotic plants. There was very, very little records kept of what the gardens were like here. So when they restored the gardens, they used these beautiful black and white photographs taken by Lorenzo Henry. He's one of the sons over in the castles. All the flower beds are original to the period. All the vegetable gardens here, the herb gardens, the nuttery up on the back walls, they're all very close to how they would have been in the heyday of the castle. You will see the under gardener's house has been restored here, and the head gardener's beautiful house has been restored here as well. So it's our hope that in the future more of these glass houses will be brought back.
What is your position here in the Abbey?
Well, I'm what we call the abbess. That's the person who is responsible, leads the community and responsible for the whole place, and there's a lot of administration involved and developing plans for the future. A very strong element in Benedictine vision is hospitality, to be a place where God is worshipped, but the place is open for strangers, everybody who comes, and they should enjoy what they find. And the way things should be is just in keeping with all that there should be many people coming, everybody who would like to, and that they should find a good message here.
I'm in Kinsale, Ireland, being joined by a gentleman by the name of Joe Walsh. He's a member of our tour this year here in Ireland. And Joe, tell me a little bit about how you came to know Celtic Rider motorcycle rentals and tours, and how you came to love Ireland, and so much so that you visited it 3 times.
Well, I was over here 3.5 years ago with a number of my friends, and we started off up in Galway and Clifton, where my ancestors are from. And the first day we drove on the Sky Road on a day much like this, not a cloud in the sky. We were on that road about 100 yards. I turned to my wife and said, I got to come back here and ride a motorcycle. And started a search for, is there someone who will rent me one? And then I discovered Celtic Rider. And I started a long email conversation and phone conversations with Paul about coming back, renting a bike, and riding as much of Ireland as I possibly could. And ultimately that ended up in a long, kind of around the entire coast of Ireland trip with my youngest daughter last year. And it was so much fun. I was looking for an opportunity to come back as soon as possible, which brings me here with you.
It's been an amazing experience. What is your favorite road? I mean, there's so many beautiful, beautiful roads here in Ireland. What's your favorite road to ride here?
Probably the Gap of Dunlow at this point. It's just a road that just begs to be driven up by a motorcycle. It's very, very narrow, a million turns, ups and downs, and then you have the added adventure of trying to avoid the horse and buggies and the horse droppings that are in the middle of the road. But there's so many roads here. Just pick a county and I can name a road I love.
This is your second time renting bikes from Celtic Rider Motorcycle Tours. Tell me about your experience of working with Paul and Mick, and what aspect of it you've enjoyed the most?
Well, they respond to everything almost immediately if you have questions, and I'm a bit of a pain in the neck because I have thousands and thousands of questions. So Paul and Mick both helped me with the routes and gave me that the sense that most Americans don't have about how you can travel in Ireland, because we look at this little island and we think we can go around this thing in 15 minutes, but you don't cover more than 20 miles an hour in Ireland one way or the other. Either it's because the roads are so curvy, which is wonderful, or because you want to stop and take a picture every 5 minutes, which is usually what happens.
This country just begs to be ridden, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Over and over again. New roads to find, and as you've discovered, you know, we take a right-hand turn by accident and we're on another great road, and then you get back to where you want to be, and you take 20 roads through farmlands and hills, and it's great.
It is. Thank you for joining us on the Belt Drive Betty Celtic Rider Tour, and let's go ride.
Thanks for having me. Let's go.
I'm in Kinsale, Ireland right now, being joined by the proprietress of a beautiful little restaurant called Crackpots. And Carol, tell me a little bit about your restaurant and how it came to be.
Okay, well, I've been in the restaurant business a long time, but I gave it up to become a potter. So I did ceramics for a while, and when I decided to put the two together, I called it Crackpots because of cracked pots, and the word crack for fun in Ireland is crack.
Yeah.
And pots, you know, we eat off the pot. So it all came together. So this is my 17th year, which has been very, very successful. As you can see, it's very crowded in there. And we're just about to get into our gourmet festival. So we'll have a very busy weekend ahead of us.
And you're part of the Good Food Trail. Can you explain a little bit to my audience about that? Because there's nothing bikers love more than really good food, and you serve some very, very good food.
Okay, well, it was started, the circle was started about 37 years ago, and this is our 35th gourmet festival. The circle was started by restaurateurs when there was only 4 restaurants, and it's grown. We've never had more than 12 members, and they're sort of hand-picked throughout the town. I mean, there's many other places doing food as well, and good as well, but the circle work together. We work together to promote each other. We all help with suppliers and staff, and it's really a body of people who sort of crazy about food. We have local artisan producers, and at the end of the summer season we put it all together and we have our big festival.
There's always singing in this country, and I think singing happens to be good for the soul. Exactly. What do you think?
Singing and food and drink, the three go very well together. Yeah.
Tell me, what is your favorite thing about living in Kinsale?
It's the camaraderie. Is that the right word?
Yes.
The fact that everybody, even if you don't know everybody, there is always a smile on people's faces, and it's a tight community. So I think that's what it is. It's friends, people. I mean, obviously the scenery is stunning. I mean,
the scenery is most.
The one thing it isn't is the weather. Okay, I like the weather because you know it helps you. The greenery, it's good, but I mean it does get a little bit in the middle of winter, the damp, the rain. But that's what keeps it green. So
well, that's what keeps it green. The Emerald Isle, as it's well known as, but the stunning cliffs, the incredible seascapes, the beautiful rolling hills, the pastoral farms, the incredible art, the phenomenal old ancient buildings and sites. I mean, you truly have it all.
I know. We are lucky. So you staying?
I want to come back.
I was here on a holiday and I'm still here.
I'm definitely wanting to come back, that's for sure. This is a beautiful country. The hospitality's been amazing. And the food in your restaurant tonight was just
thank you.
Magnificent. I want to thank you so much, Carol, for taking a little time with me and for my audience and letting them know a little bit about the gourmet food
it's
circle.
Definitely worth a visit. It'll be going for many more years, so come over and see us. October.
I'm at the Blarney Castle in Blarney, Ireland, being joined by Paul Rollins, the owner of Celtic Rider Motorcycle Tours. Paul, tell us a little bit about the Blarney Castle and the history of this beautiful region.
But the castle is at least 1200 years old. As people probably know around the world, this Blarney Castle is absolutely famous for one thing, above all. and that is a stone. I should have said half a stone. That's up on the very top. It's up on the very parapet of the castle. It's called the Blarney Stone. And once kissed from an upside down position with a 300-foot drop, you have the gift of eloquence. Most Irish people were brought here as babies. They didn't even know what they were doing to kiss the Blarney Stone. And that's why Irish people never stop talking. And I'm dying to show your viewers what the top of the castle looks like, because the views from around the countryside are just incredible. It's a very green country, as you can see. It's early October now. It's mid-October. It's about 70 degrees Celsius. This whole island is just green all year round. I'm just dying to show it to you.
I'm dying to see it. The beautiful thing about Ireland is the climate. So let's talk about the climate for just a moment.
Well, this is day 9 of a 10-day tour. When we started, it was 22 Celsius. It got cold yesterday and today, but it's still around 17 Celsius today. Ireland is on the same latitude line as Labrador in Newfoundland, but it could be minus 40 over there on a winter's day and be plus 5 over here. And that's due to the influence of the Gulf Stream. It comes up from Mexico, hits the coast of Newfoundland and works its way across the 3,000 miles of the Atlantic Ocean, hits the west coast of Ireland, and it's a warm ocean current that keeps our island temperate all year round. So our weather in this country is not right for the latitude, but that's the way it's been for the last 10,000 years, and long may it last, is all I can say. Because we can ride all year. I ride to work all year round. We might have maybe 1 or 2 weeks we have a bit of frost on the ground, but it's rare to see snow on this island.
Magic in the riding here. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's an old country, and people may not realise, but the vast majority of the roads in the west of Ireland, just underneath that 2 inches of tarmac, is the original stone road, and that's why the roads are so narrow. They were originally invented for horse and cart, and the cart was brought into Europe around 2200 BC. So a lot of our roads are over 4,000 years old. Because they had no kind of equipment to change the landscape, they followed the natural contour of the land, and because they were taking the time travelling from village to village, they selected the most beautiful scenic areas so they could enjoy their ride in a horse and carriage. And this is going on from 2200 BC right up to now. And you've experienced these roads, you know what I'm talking about. Like, if you ride for 8 hours in the west of Ireland, you're only going to get 150 miles done, 250 kilometres, but that's a day's riding. But that's why Ireland is different. There's no point in coming over here to experience the same thing you experience at home. Yeah. It's a whole different animal over here.
This is Belt Drive Betty, and we're getting ready to say goodbye in Dublin, Ireland. We've had an amazing tour with Paul Rollins from Celtic Rider Motorcycle Tours and Adventures. And I can't express how much fun we've had, the beautiful scenery, the amazing countryside, the history, and the beauty of the people here. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us, and until next time, ride safe and ride like a local.